Hi, this is Tom Sheehy with the Sheehy Strategy Group, reporting today from the state capitol in Sacramento, California. Last month, in early January, I joined Assemblyman Josh Hoover on his Point of Order podcast in order to discuss Governor Newsom's proposed budget and California's fiscal outlook. That conversation focused on a familiar theme: how volatile state revenues can be and why short-term revenue gains should not be confused with the state's long-term fiscal stability. For those of you that have followed state finance, you've seen this story before. Since Josh and I recorded that podcast in early January, recent state general fund revenue updates from the non-partisan Legislative Analyst office have understandably reignited this discussion. The non-partisan LAO now estimates that near-term general fund revenues could be roughly $5 billion higher across the current budget window than what was projected in just last month's governor's budget. And the January budget the governor submitted to the legislature had what most fiscal analysts and experts, including me, considered to be a very rosy revenue forecast. So these current revenue updates showing stronger revenues than the governor projected just 1 month ago is quite meaningful news. And it's also a strong reminder of how quickly California's revenue picture can change. To be clear, these revenue updates do not invalidate concerns about the state's underlying budget condition, and that is that the long-term expenditures in the state far exceed the long-term revenues based upon current laws. It reinforces a distinction that gets lost in budget debates: the difference between short-term revenue performance and long-term fiscal health. Even the LAO is explicit that any near-term revenue gain should be viewed as a one-time windfall and not a permanent fix. Under California's constitutional formulas, a significant share of additional revenue is automatically directed to K-14 education and various educational reserves. This is all in alignment with the Proposition 98 funding guarantee for K-14 education. As a result of this, a $5 billion revenue improvement does not translate into a $5 billion benefit to the state's deficit. The LAO estimates that it would reduce near-term deficits by closer to $2.5 billion, with the balance going to education. But more importantly, the structural challenges facing the budget remain unchanged. State spending pressures continue to grow faster than the ongoing revenues. Federal support is declining. Multi-year commitments made by the state of California during prior surplus years are still built into the budget outlook, causing the long-term expenditures to be significantly higher than the revenues will support. None of those dynamics disappear simply because revenues come in stronger than expected for just a few months. There's also broad agreement, including from the LAO, that the risk of a revenue downturn in the next year or two is quite real. California's tax base remains heavily dependent on high-income earners and capital gains, making revenues especially sensitive to financial markets and investment cycles. Neither administration nor LAO forecasts fully account for the possibility of a sharp correction tied to the artificial intelligence and related investment or broader market volatility. In addition, reports of increased tax planning, income shielding, and taxpayer migration out of the state raise very legitimate questions about the durability of California's future revenue growth and its budget stability. Proposed tax changes, regardless of intent, can alter behaviors in ways that are difficult to model, but that can have significant impacts over time. None of this is to dismiss the value of updated revenue data. Budget forecasting requires humility, and responsible analysis means adjusting as new information becomes available. If the revenues continue to outperform expectations, the governor's May revision will reflect that. But a stronger May revision does not eliminate the need for caution. One-time money should be treated as one-time money. Using temporary gains to expand ongoing programs only increases the risk of deeper cuts when the next downturn arrives. This is a lesson that California has learned repeatedly over the years. As the budget process moves forward, the real question is not whether a single forecast goes up or down, but whether budget decisions align with the long-term realities of California's economy, revenue structure, and spending obligations. Will Governor Newsom require the legislative budget writers to actually reduce spending so that the long-term forecast aligns with long-term revenues? Or will he ask them to raise taxes to make sure that the long-term revenues are high enough to cover those expenditures? These are difficult questions, and the questions matter for far more than any single data point on revenue, and it will still matter long after this budget cycle concludes. From Sacramento, this is Tom Sheehy. Thanks a lot for listening.